Thanks, Reanna, for being on the show today. Introduce yourself to everybody.
Hi, my name is Reanna Schultz. I have been in the cyber field for a little over 7 years now. I have a very diverse, colorful background, primarily in endpoint security engineering, network security engineering, and then I found my way into cyber defense. So I currently work and lead a security operations center team, and part time at night, I try to run my own business. I teach college classes, and of course, I'm a content creator on YouTube and LinkedIn because why not?
Yeah, I know there's just not enough hours in the day, right?
No, not at all.
Cool. So, I think some of the questions I'm going to ask you today are just really easy softball questions for you, not necessarily for me and my audience. But what got you into cyber defense? What started you down this path?
Yeah, and I grew up in a very rural Missouri town. I always make the joke that there's more cows than people.
Right.
And so I didn't really, I'm going to be honest, like STEM or even computer science wasn't really
Hmm.
in my scope, and that's just because of how my education was and my upbringing. We focus more on, I would say, arts and theater and, physical education rather than here's a computer, learn how to program essentially. And one of the things that my parents did, I remember I was 17, they sat me down and they're like, okay, it's time for you to figure out your life. And that is a very big question to
It
ask a
is.
17-year-old. And of course, at the time, I'm like, I don't know. And I thought about being a veterinarian just because I had like a ton of chickens, like 60 or 70
Mhm.
chickens. I was very active in FFA and 4-H and all of those fun activities. And it turns out I'm allergic to cats. So it worked
Mm.
out. I did not go through veterinarian school. That would have been a very fun experience. But one of the things that my school did offer was career day. And as part of career day, they would bring in like parents from the students and stuff like that. And one of the parents was a state highway patrolman. And one of the
Mhm.
things I remember was how passionate he was to provide community safety and security expertise. And I said, oh, I was like, I want to go be a state highway patrolman. I was like, this is fun. Like, this guy's really excited. He's really serving the community. And then, of course, you get a cool car because why not? And well, I came home and I was really excited to tell my parents. I was like, I'm gonna go do this. And they're like, okay. And I was like, you guys told me to go figure out my life, and I figured it out. And they're like, okay, you know what you want to do. What do you want to do now? And I went to my school counselor and I said, hey, I'm pretty much bored in high school. Like, I know what I want to do and it's exciting to me. Like, what do I need? And they're like, well, you can graduate early if you want it. And I was like, wait, that's an option in high school to graduate early. And so I remember being 17. I was scared. I graduated high school early. I went in and took the ACT. I got the lowest score I possibly could to go to college because I thought it was a waste of time. And I had moved out, and it was one of the most scary experiences I've ever had. And everything was on my own dollar. My college was on my own time, and I ended up working at Buffalo Wild Wings throughout my university. And I was serving chicken to pay for my studies. And when I was going through my college classes, criminal justice classes were so boring. And I apologize for anyone listening to this that is a CJ major or a law major. I don't know
They
how
would
you do
probably
it.
say the same thing.
I I remember showing up to class and I was like, "Who cares?" Like, I'm like, "Why are we making a big deal about what neighbor accidentally mowed the other neighbor's lawn? Like, who cares that this is a court case?" I was like, "No, this is not for me." And I went back to that moment where I really thought this was for me. And of course, again, it worked out. I'm 5'2". I'm super short. Like, I couldn't imagine tackling anyone tall and big when I'm just literally a very tiny person. And and so I again, right, I did some reflection. I was like, why did I really want to go into this field? It was because of how passionate that highway patrolman was. So I did some reflecting and I thought to myself, what made me passionate. And I was thinking about the activities I was doing. I really enjoyed waitressing for most of the time, mostly because of the money. And then I was also thinking what other curriculum activities I'm doing. And weightlifting was something I was really, really into. I was super big into bodybuilding and creating dietary plans for other people and things like that. So I was like, okay, cool. Maybe this is something I should pursue. So I changed my major to physical therapy. And I hated physical therapy. Again, I was like, who cares about the bones of the body? Like I just want to bulk. I literally took a class called PE and I played kickball for an entire semester. I paid money
Yep.
to play kickball, not even at
Hmm.
a competitive league. And
Yep.
so I thought to myself, I was like, why am I not enjoying this? And around that time, especially when you go through college, you have to take courses called elective courses. And one of my elective courses was a technology course. And the only class that was open during that semester was a Python programming course.
Okay.
And I knew nothing about programming. I didn't even really know anything about computer science. I was just like, whatever, it's a 1100 class. It should be pretty easy, especially if it's an elective course. I walked in and I fell in love with this class. And I really thought to myself, why is this so different compared to the other two majors I thought I would enjoy? And I realized it's the type of thinking with criminal justice and physical therapy. It's a lot of black and white answers. Essentially, it's yes or no. Like, this is correct, this is not. This is how you spell something, this is not how you spell something. And it's a very direct, linear type of thinking. And with
Hmm.
Python programming, I realized I could be creative with my solutions. I can have diverse types of ways to get to an answer. It allowed me to think outside the box rather than just be set on a path. And some people, I like, especially engineers, right? They are very straightforward to the answer, and some people are very successful in those areas. For me, it wasn't. I like to forge my own path. I always make a joke that I'm one of those people, whenever you play a one of those RPG games or open world games, I go off of the main quest and I just do all the side quests, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I probably should go back and do the thing that the game is designed for. So
Right.
that is me to a T. And eventually, of course, that led to me getting into cybersecurity. So I ended up, one of the big things that someone taught me very early on in college is your net worth is your network, essentially. And that is
Mm.
so true. So I tried getting as engaged as I could in the community. I tried making connections to as many people as I could and just really building my personal brand, which led me to my first job, essentially. And I was very blessed. I worked at a Fortune 50 company my first 3.5 years and
Wow.
decided to
Very
go to a
good.
startup. Yeah, I decided to go to a startup right after, realize I do not like startups. It is not for me. I like the busy life of the hustle and bustle, and eventually found my way back to corporate America. So here we are now. A very long-winded story to
No.
a very simple question.
Well, no, but like I've already learned that you're a self-starter, you're very hardworking, you're very
Yeah.
passionate about stuff, and I find that key element in a lot of the guests that I have on this show because they are people who are just like, I know what I'm good at, and I want
Yep.
you to know what I know so that you don't get yourself in trouble, that sort of
Yeah.
thing. And so that's
Absolutely.
why that's why I think you're going to help us out here with stuff. So again, this is going to be such a low question for you, but like everybody listening to this has a password.
Yeah.
And some people are really good about making, passphrases and stuff like that. So other
Yeah.
people are still using password 1234. What are some tips that you have for making secure passwords that we can remember, or do we just need to jump right to a password manager?
Yeah. And this is such a question. And I often get asked very frequently, specifically by
Hmm.
close friends and family, right? I will not name the family member because they often watch my podcast, but one of the passwords that they use for Facebook was Facebook one period.
Mm.
And it
Hmm.
was such a
Hmm.
surprise when all of a sudden they were getting messages from their Facebook friends and they're like, "Hey, I think your Facebook got hacked." And they're like, "What? Why?" And it's just like, no idea why. No idea why here. And I always tell people as well, like, you have to be very it's not just passwords, right? It's what you're doing with your email address too. The more you use your
Mhm.
email address, the wider your digital footprint is because now you're creating yourself an online identity. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't care, if my account gets hacked. I don't care about any of this. And I'm like, you
Right.
absolutely should. Think about like social media, for example. Think about all of the personal information that is on your social media, your house. Okay. Well,
Mhm.
why would you care about your house? Well, now people can spam you with garbage physically. It is a thing. It is a very common thing. And another thing that people really don't think about is the privacy of their own children.
Mhm.
Children in today's
Right.
world, they don't have a right as to maybe they're part of a family vlog now. Like they're part of that business. Now they're on social media. Now they're making TikToks. Now it's all these things. This stuff does not go away. And it
Right.
follows you all the way until you die. And what's even more wild is how it's so easy, especially with employers, that you're able to just pull up someone's account and essentially see everything. And
Mhm.
it's one thing to Google yourself, but now with all of these open AI tools, you can literally ask ChatGPT about yourself and it will fetch all of that information for you automatically. And
Mhm.
so it starts with, why is that important? Well, how important is your self image? How important is your family or your friends? You can't control what people screenshot and potentially use to blackmail you down the road. And a lot of
Yep.
people just really, really don't think about that.
Mhm.
And so, starting with the why, it leads to how important is the risk of using a bad password. If you, now, don't get me wrong. There's some things I will absolutely use a very terrible, crummy password in the moment of. Like, I submit a lot of talks to a lot of different conferences, and sometimes I just need a one-time password to submit the talk, and I will never use that account again. Most of the time it gets deleted just because of how that service is offered. I don't really use a very strong password for it. Now, there's
Mhm.
things that I absolutely will use a password manager for, just so I don't have to generate the password. Or a lot of the times, the passwords that are built into majority smartphones now, where it just auto populates it for you.
Mhm.
And I take some things very serious, like my banking account, for example. I enable biometrics, I enable auto generated passwords, and also MFA, because to me, if my password does get compromised, it's a thing, regardless of how complex the password is, essentially, it can be compromised. There is a risk. But at least if I enable MFA, it reduces access to my account.
Mhm.
And most of the time, it's just a text message to your phone, and it
Right.
takes 3 seconds to turn on. It's literally a radio button in settings.
Mhm. Mhm.
So to me, it's a personal question, a personal preference as to what how how much is your data worth, essentially. And regardless of the password and how it's used, turn on that MFA option, because if your account does get sold on the undergrounds, it at least isn't worth a whole lot at this point. So,
Mhm. Gotcha. Right. So, speaking of, multi-factor authentication, like I have been sitting on my couch on a Friday night and I get a message from Instagram saying, "Hey, here's your link for your password reset." And I'm like, "I didn't do this," you
yep.
know? And I'm like, "Okay, well, somebody's trying to hack my account again,
Mhm.
so I'm going to go monitor this for a little while and see what's going on." So yeah, like I can personally attest that, those things work. But a lot of people have this misconception that if they come up with their own like secret password that nobody can guess it. But hackers are not guessing your passwords, right? They're using programs. Kind of
Yep.
walk us through what they're doing.
Yeah, so in the industry, I would say the professional term is called script kiddies.
Hmm.
And, and essentially what they do, there's a lot of different security tools that you can use that are free. They're not illegal. They become illegal with intent and purpose and how you
Right.
use it. But a lot of times people will use essentially what's called a rainbow table, which is a range of different password complexities, links, everything else. And a lot of times they might be used with these open source tools, or now threat actors are using these open AI models to make more complex rainbow tables, more complex scripts that allow them to essentially guess, quotations around the word guess, your password. And there is a table that was, I believe it was in 2022. It tells you about the complexity of your password. So the length, how many numbers, special
Hmm.
characters,
Right.
phrases,
I've
all
seen
these
those.
other things. Yeah, and how long it could potentially be hacked. But now a lot of stuff is getting automated where it's a
Hmm.
probably more efficient, faster way, especially if you're using specific programming languages to make that query um, more efficient for the threat actor side as well. So even if, right, if you're saying, "Hey, my password is I love rubber duckies," followed by the year and an exclamation point, yeah, it's a very quote unquote strong password,
How did
but
you know
it
my
will,
password? Did you
oh
hack
my
me?
gosh.
Because that's
Nah.
it.
It's I don't know, maybe it's because Sesame Street's starting to become
Right.
popular again with Elmo. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things like at end of the day, a password is not gonna be 100%. That's why I have a job, is to
Yeah.
find people
True.
that are trying to do these malicious things.
Very true. So, a lot of us, we all have our Wi-Fi networks at home. There are people who will just take it right out of the box, plug it in, and they're just sort of
Oh my
thankful that the
gosh.
thing turns on, but they're still
Oh my
using the
gosh.
default, username and password from Netgear or TP-Link or whoever. And even me, I know that all of those are online. Like you can go look them up. Like the manufacturer will sometimes list the common passwords or whatever. So if I get a new Wi-Fi system or anything like that, what do I need to do to make sure that, my neighbor can't get it or a malicious actor can't get it either?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I don't know how many times I have logged in with admin on my my friends and families, and
Sure.
then just to prove a point, right? You can go in and just change the password so that way you're completely locked out, and then you have to go through customers. It's a good lesson learned for anyone, but I always recommend people, especially when you're moving into a new home, like an apartment
Hmm.
or condo or whatever, the people setting up the Wi-Fi, most of the time, they are technically trained to walk you through on how to change the username, how to change the default password. In fact, I believe Google Fiber now, that's part of the setup is so you have to change it while the technical support person is there just to
Okay.
get rid of the built-in things as well. A lot of the times with a lot of newer network providers now, if you're out in a rural area, I'm sorry, I do feel for you and your Wi-Fi bandwidth. I remember growing up, I couldn't watch Netflix at the same time as my sister, so one
Gotcha.
of us we would have to share. But most of the time, a lot of these modern day network providers essentially they offer you a private Wi-Fi. So this is private Wi-Fi that is limited to your friends and family. So the network bandwidth is separate and how it's used, and you can throttle it to your personal home needs. And then you have a guest Wi-Fi. So the guest Wi-Fi might be
Hmm.
username guest, password guest, right? And it's quote unquote separate from your home network as well. So it allows that bandwidth to not be as strong and doesn't ruin what you're doing essentially to impact your day to day. So there's a lot of things that you can do. I also recommend people to call a support person probably once a year to come out and just make sure everything is updated up to code and you
Hmm.
don't have to worry about it because it is very, very frequent that not only do passwords and usernames get guessed very, very, very frequently, but also exploiting those servers as well and taking over, especially if you have smart home devices. Like you
Hmm.
can start your dishwasher on your phone, you can start your oven on your phone, or hey, I can check my fridge now and see what I'm running out of. All these things are connected to your Wi-Fi, and personally, I don't like to think about my oven randomly turning on and then being set to 700 degrees because
Yep.
someone was curious if they could do it, and
Hmm.
it's a very scary thought to have, and I again, right, just making sure it's updated, making sure that the default credentials are changed, and if you're listening to this and you're like, "I don't even like, it's a weird password that they gave me. That's still a default password
Yes. Right.
that most of the times it's shared with other customers as well, and I guarantee you there was probably a page on Reddit or GitHub that is shared amongst the entire community as, "Hey, these are common used passwords with network providers that you can use to try to essentially get into so said neighbor's Wi-Fi and just steal off of it for a bit."
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, a lot of people think, and you kind of alluded to this a little while ago, and I think this is important, and I want to get your take on this. People
Yeah.
say, "Oh, nobody cares about me. Nobody would ever hack my Facebook. I'm a boring person. I don't have anything to hide." What do you say to that?
I say even the janitor that works at a school is a way for someone to get in. Everyone is an entry point.
Mhm.
And one thing that people don't think about often is if we want to use the Wi-Fi one as an example, you get on that Wi-Fi, it is keys to the kingdom to someone's personal network, especially if you save your passwords in your browser. It is so
Mhm.
easy to get those passwords because it's literally just a click of a button for a threat actor, and so now if you really think about everything that you saved in your browser, think about your financial information, think about everything else, and then on top of that, threat actors run this as a business, like, this is their
Yeah.
full-time job,
Mhm.
and people don't really think about that. It doesn't matter who you are, that is still a dollar amount to them. Especially if someone might work in sales, it doesn't matter how small the commission is. It's still a commission to them at end of the day. The only difference is threat actors probably don't put it on their IRS taxes. But
Right.
but to them, if they sell passwords and usernames in the underground market for a dollar and they get 50
Mhm.
people to buy that username and password, that's 50
Mhm.
bucks to them. So
Mhm.
even if you might be Joe Schmo that works at a small business market, that's a normal 9 to 5 employee and comes home to a normal family, that's still a dollar sign to someone. That's
Yeah.
still commission for someone who is really trying to sell it. And I think it's just such a misconception in today's world where people are like, well, these threat actors are targeting these very big and expensive companies. No, they're not. A lot of the times they're trying to collect information from people
Mhm.
that don't think that they're a target because again they're making that commission, and especially threat actors, they're snake oil salesmen too. I don't know how many articles I have seen in the last year where people talk about chat gpt getting hacked and stealing all of this user information when in reality those stolen creds are from other types of malware, and the credentials are also allows a threat actor to authenticate into ChatGPT. So it didn't come from ChatGPT, but threat actors are selling it as, "Hey, we hacked
Mm.
ChatGPT. Here's the credentials you can use to get into ChatGPT." And it's making a car shiny even though it's missing
Mhm.
wheels and a fender essentially.
Gotcha.
And so people don't really think about that side of cyber because it is a business, People
Right.
are making commission.
Right. Yeah. Somebody thinks, oh, it's just somebody who directly wants to hurt me. It is an individual who knows me. And that's not the case. You're just, like you said,
No.
you're just a dollar sign to so
Yep.
many people. Like you've got, 4 people living in your house. Well, that's $4 signs right there.
Yep.
You know, got it. All right. So we got a lot of parents who are listening to the show today, and they are, our kids are living a much more digital life than you and I ever did. What are some what are some things that parents can do to make sure that their kids are making good decisions online, whether that's gaming or social media or, whatever it is that they're doing? What are some kind of guidelines you can give us?
Oh my goodness. I can get on a whole soap for this. So there was I do a lot of different talks. I'll go to local high schools sometimes or middle schools, and this is a question I often get asked is, "Hey, can you talk about social media safety? Can you talk about this? Can you talk about
Mhm.
that?" And it was 2011 was when I joined Facebook. So that was the first time I ever was on social media. And especially one of the things oh, if I can just tell teenage Rihanna, don't do this. I cringe about some of the
Yeah.
things I did.
Yeah. We're all
Um,
there.
but But my Instagram does not exist for a reason. But, one of the things that I remember in my youth was the amount of satisfaction that we get when we add people, when we like, when we comment, when we just get
Mhm.
so caught up in this fast-paced environment. And of course, as you mature, your mannerisms change, obviously. But again, I used this phrase earlier in this podcast, digital footprint. It goes
Mhm.
everywhere. And one of the talks that I did for a school is I went to a website, and the teacher, I essentially asked for her, first and last name, and I made sure I spelt it right, and I used this tool. I looked up her first and last name, and then I also added the school district she taught at, and you can essentially see every single time someone, posts publicly on Twitter or Facebook and X, and from there, I was able to locate her house, and then I was able to see the kids that she posted, and then, of course, their kids have social media, so now I can see literally where their kids walk to the friend's house and back from the friend's house because they're sitting there, chatting on Messenger and everything that's public. And the kids that saw this, like their eyes just got so big. And
Mhm.
I said, Snapchat? I said, that doesn't go away. I said, there are
Mm-mm.
legal obligations for data to be stored on these servers. I was like, "Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist." I said, "It is by law. You have to have XYZ worth of data." So, and then like the kid's eyes got really big. I'm like, "I'll let you think about what you've been sending for the last month to your
Mhm.
so said friend." And, so it's just one of those, like, eye-awakening moments, and especially as a parent, you don't it's one thing to post a picture about your own kid, right? You're the parent's guardian.
Right.
I trust that
Right.
you have bad or good judgment in that sense. But then when you think about what your kids are doing and how you cannot control the moment they hit post, it is out of your wheelhouse. And, I always tell parents, I said, "Look in the settings of your kid's social media profile." I go back to make sure MFA is enabled. I
Mhm.
always tell parents to also, go through and limit what data is being shared outside, and you can literally just Google how to secure my Instagram account, how to
Mhm.
secure my Snapchat account. There is so many articles that is even written by the like people that own Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok and tell you how to limit your data usage because it is important. It's not something that is hidden, but a lot of the times it's not disabled by default because again, these social media platforms will be selling your data to third-party sites that
Mhm.
can use it for marketing. But what they don't control is what those third parties do. And so those third parties could potentially sell it to other websites. And so now everything is following your child around. And so this is where I mean, you're not going to let your kid go hang out, in the bad part downtown of a big city. I always like to use that for social media or even online as well. Like if your kids are looking up bad things, it's essentially going to be populated everywhere they go now because it's tied to their digital footprint. And it takes a
Mhm.
very, very long time for the online algorithms to change to make it rainbows and unicorns again. I call it the internet rehab essentially.
Right.
And another thing I always recommend to people is you're not going to go up to a random person that's sitting on the side of a highway asking for money, asking who what their name is, how their day is, like especially if they look shady.
Mhm.
Or maybe they look clean and it turns out they are not a good person at all. Like you're not going
Mhm.
to pick up a
Okay.
random hitchhiker. It's like that with social media. You do not wanna add just random people. Do not talk to strangers. Step 1, do not talk to strangers. If you do not know the person, then whatever. Of course, like, LinkedIn, in my opinion, is a little bit different because it's more of a
Mhm.
professional network, but still, don't just be handing out just random conversations. Don't be posting pictures, and especially on video gaming platforms, it is notorious for kids to get scammed out
Mhm.
of money using their parents' credit card, and they have no idea because someone might have a sad story or someone might be needing this. And my biggest advice is do not be nice, like, to
Mm.
online people. Like, just
Mhm.
because they have a sad story just because they might seem innocent, it doesn't mean anything. I've learned this the very hard way, and it's something I preach to a lot of parents is everyone has a sad story. It's just we are raised to be empathetic. We're raised to be friendly to people, and we wanna help, right? We're good people,
Mhm.
but
Right.
you don't know the person. Don't like, everyone has a sad story, and, you know, it's you just don't know who's on the other side.
Right. And, you make such a good point about don't be nice to other people, but you don't necessarily have to be rude, but
No.
you don't have to do what they want you to do. And
Yep.
I
Yep,
think
correct.
that's hard for an adult, let alone a
Yeah.
teenager with peer pressure and all of that sort of stuff. So it really is more like, hey, this person may want money or they may want to like give you something, that sort of thing, just
Yeah.
say no, because I think there's a lot of times that people get labeled as toxic because they don't do what the crowd is doing and that sort of thing. So you're really just saying be empathetic, but draw the line right there, just don't take action, right?
Yeah. And I always encourage parents, of course, like, it gets really hard because you don't wanna break your own kid's trust at all, but
Sure.
I always tell parents, make sure you have proper monitoring apps, make sure you have location enabled on your kid's phone, like,
Hmm.
have these discussions as to why it's important, and then because one day they will be a parent and they will understand why having so said things. And of course, like, you wanna trust your kid's privacy and everything as well, but there is a middle ground as to you don't want something to be a surprise one day as
Hmm.
a parent and then ask, "What could I have done different?"
Right.
And there's a ton of free stuff that you can do. There's some apps that if a website hits a specific category, you can get an alert. Same thing with your network provider on your Wi-Fi. You can set up specific alerts or block specific types of, adult content or, maybe things such as like promotion of alcohol or
Hmm.
illegal activities. Like every website has their own category and you can go in and set up these alerts to monitor it, especially even app usage. If you see app usage going very, very high in a specific app, and this can be iMessage, this can be a texting app, like you can set up these alerts through these different platforms. And it's something I absolutely recommend because then you're not sitting there scrolling through your kid's phone. It's a way to automate it and know if something suspicious or weird is happening.
Right. I had to sit down and have the discussion with my son about, he's big into gaming now, and he wanted to get a
Yeah.
headset so that he could talk to people and all that sort of stuff. And, it was one of those things that was like, all right, don't tell him everything all at once because you'll overwhelm him. So I really had to like pull back on it. And it was like, we're only going to talk to the people who we know. You can talk to me, you can
Yep.
talk to your friends. You need to ask permission for this sort of stuff. And, one of them, it's because people just, gosh, they just flip out on video games. They will say horrible things to
Anything.
kids and
Yeah.
hurt their feelings and all that sort of stuff. And then of course you have people who are, predators who are trying to get your kids
Yep.
to move to a Discord server to talk about and
Yep.
watch these pictures and stuff. So it was like, hey man, like this is where we're going to start. And you can't just have one conversation, right? It's got to be like a continual thing.
Yep, it does. And it's I always like to use the analogy, it's like teaching your kids to drive. Like
Hmm.
you want them to be able to go experience the world, but you wanna make sure it's in a safe way. And I always say there's like these random safety checks that happen for a reason. Like, oh, you see a police officer sitting on the off ramp to a highway doing speed checks. Okay, well, that's a subtle reminder to slow down,
Hmm.
remember like the basics and stuff like that. And another thing that I always try to tell parents is, like, when something bad does happen to a kid, like the feeling of being blackmailed and stuff like that, it's a very hard conversation to have, and just be like, "No matter how bad the situation is, like, I am here to support you and everything else," because a lot of times kids, they don't realize what happened until it's too late. Because to them, it's something else, and
Yeah.
whatever their personal reason is, and it's really hard on a parent side because it's like, that's your baby, you know?
Hmm. Hmm. It is. Yeah. And I think any parent who's ever had to go through this would tell their friends and neighbors, have the conversation now so you don't have to
Yep.
have it later and try to rebuild them at the same time. Like, just go ahead and talk
Yep.
to them about it. You're not going to ruin your kids' innocence. A lot of people are afraid of that. Go
Yep.
ahead and have the conversation now, because if you don't, somebody else is, and it's not going to go like you want it.
Yeah, it's very and, like, especially being young, we were all there once and we're like, "Nothing bad will happen to us," and
Right.
then, that one thing happens, you're like, "Oh, man," and then, like, as you get older, you're like, "Oh my gosh, like, if my mom and dad knew," you know?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Well, Rihanna, thank you so much for talking to us today and, really educating us on what's going on. Where can people find out more about you online?
Oh, yes, I am everywhere except for Instagram for obvious reasons. You can visit my website. It's https cyberspeaklabs.com. You can find a lot of my community stuff there. I am on LinkedIn. I am on X. You can find me on X as Cyber Rihanna with one R. I do post a lot of fun YouTube shorts and stuff like that on there that talks about corporate America and a little bit of what's like being on the cyber defense side every day. Long story short, it's just a bunch of fires and a dumpster, rowing down the river in a very slow
Yep.
pace. That is my day to day.
Gotcha.
But for the most part, I do have if you do have a kid that is wanting to get into cybersecurity
Hmm.
or just start building their network and brand, I do run my own Discord server. It is moderated. I have very good admins that make sure no illegal activity is promoted. It is a great place to learn and network and ask questions, and it's a very positive community out there as well. There is some good to the cyber side, so education is always key, in my opinion.
Very cool. Again, thank you for your time today and good luck with everything that you're doing. I hope you get to put out a couple of dumpster fires today.
Every day.